Okay, so welcome to Lesson 2 in our course on dodging and burning here at Retouching Academy, and this is where the real nitty-gritty starts. We're actually going to start working on an image, and we're going to do some corrective dodge and burn, and teach you some techniques along the way, as well as some helper tools to help you visualize things a little bit better. So we're going to start an image from this series. This is essentially a completed image from the same sort of look. So we're going to work on a different image, but this is kind of give you an idea of what the end product kind of looks like after we do some of our dodging and burning here. So this is our starting image that we're going to work off of. And essentially all I've done here, actually, let's get rid of this stuff here because I'm going to show you how to do all this. And so all I've really done here is just healed things out here. So I've just gone ahead and done a little bit of healing brush on a blank layer. And other than that, that is it. Obviously, I prepared the raw file and brought it into Photoshop. So we're going to go ahead and start by creating our dodge and burn stack, just the way we talked about last time. So we're going to call this DB. We're going to create a group in here. We'll call this corrective. And again, we'll create our two curves layer. So we're going to use curves for everything here. This will be our burn. And I'm going to duplicate that with Command J. This will be our dodge. And we're just going to nudge this one up. All right. Let's rename this one to burn. Okay. And I'm not going to clip anything onto these. We're just going to leave them as is. And I'll call these ones contour. All right, and then we'll set these guys to luminosity, just like we talked about in the first lesson. All right, so let's close this down. I always find it a good idea to close down the group that I'm not working on, because what tends to happen is after a while you start to lose track and you end up doing your corrective stuff on your contouring layer, and then it becomes a mess. So better just to close down whatever you're not using so you're not confused. So the first thing we want to do, obviously, when we're working in color, and I'm going to assume that we're going to end up with a black and white image here. I think for this lesson it's easier to just kind of get rid of any sort of color issues, and we're going to talk about how to deal with them later. I think for now we're just going to deal with the actual process of dodging and burning and just getting all of the luminosities sorted out. So in order to help us visualize things, we're going to make this image black and white, because when we take away the color, it's just one thing that's distracting us, and if we leave just the luminosities, it becomes a little bit easier to spot those areas that we need to fix. So I tend to go and create a helper group, because sometimes I have more than one layer. It's just easier to have it as one group called helper. And there's a lot of different things that you can do as far as a helper to remove the color information. So we can, for example, go with a good old-fashioned black and white, right? And then we can take this down. If we take down yellows, this kind of helps to exacerbate some of the issues that we have within the skin. Now, while the black and white works a good chunk of the time, it's problematic because it's not necessarily an accurate representation of the luminosities. It's sort of a representation of, relative luminosities in terms of colors. So, simply by moving this around, so I'm basically saying, okay, take the reds and make the reds really dark. But that's not really an accurate representation of what the final end product will look like. Now, there's a caveat here, and the caveat is that, if we're working on a black and white image, it's going to be black and white in the end, then it really doesn't matter because we have no color information to worry about. Where it becomes an issue with the black and white is when we turn off the black and white and we're left with color that isn't looking quite right because the luminosities aren't really accurate. Now, if we decide, okay, this is going to be a black and white image, and the black and white is going to be something like that, that's going to be my black and white conversion, well, then it really doesn't matter. All that matters is that it looks good under the black and white conversion that you're going to have. Now, let's not assume that here, because I know I've said let's assume that we're going to be working on a black and white, but let's not do that. Let's do it kind of the way that I typically do it, which is through a solid color layer, but just kind of making you aware of that. So if you're working on a photo, it's going to be black and white, go ahead and use your black and white adjustment, kind of set it the way you think you want to have it as your end product, and then just work on it and get it looking good. Because once it looks good, it really doesn't matter what the color information is below, because it's never going to be seen. But if you're going to work on a color image, then you want something that's a little bit more accurate than the black and white adjustment. So another alternative to that would be to take a hue saturation adjustment and then essentially just desaturate the image entirely. Now, that is a pretty accurate representation. It's still not perfect. Now, the problem with hue saturation for me, too, is that it actually makes it pretty difficult to see the areas that I need to fix. So I personally don't like using it. And our good friend Connie has a pretty in-depth video about, what you should use and, kind of the science behind everything in terms of, desaturating this way, that way, using solid color layers. And I trust the guy because he's a pretty smart guy, and his theories are sound. So I tend to use the solid color layer like he recommends, and really, having used it for a couple months now, it's just a great way to go. In particular, because sometimes I have images that are gelled, so I'll have, one color kind of hitting one side of the face, and then I'll have another color hitting the other side, filling in shadows. And what happens is once you have all those gelled colors, if you either desaturate or use a black and white adjustment, it really just does not represent those colors accurately. So in the end, when you go back to color, it's just kind of a mess. So this really is kind of the solution that works the best the majority of the time. So, you can't really go wrong with this approach. And so what we do is we just grab a solid color, and obviously we need to choose something that is, not white, I would say. Don't choose white or black. Choose something like a middle gray. It doesn't have to be, perfectly middle gray, so don't worry about actually distributing these values here. Just kind of get it in there. So once we have that, set it to color blend mode, and that's just going to basically pull out all of our color information for us, leave us with just kind of a luminosity representation of the image. Once we have that, we're going to go into curves, because what I want to do is I want to kind of bring down the overall exposure or luminosity of the image. It's going to make it a little bit easier to spot things. So if we kind of pull this down, we can see that those kind of issues come out a little bit more. So don't go crazy like this, because then you start losing detail and you can't really tell what's going on. So find sort of a happy medium. I think somewhere in and around here is a pretty good starting point, and then we can adjust that up and down if we need to. All right, so we've got our helpers set up, and we've got our actual dodge and burn stack set up, so we can go ahead and actually get started and start correcting this image. So the first thing we need to do is choose a brush and some appropriate brush settings. So what I tend to do, just grab a regular brush, so hit the B key for the brush, and then just 0 hardness, and just size-wise where we're going to adjust as we go. So 0 hardness, and then we're going to adjust flow rate. I tend to prefer to use flow over opacity, simply because there's some areas that I want to just kind of go over several times and build up that effect pretty quickly without having to actually lift my pen off the tablet. With opacity, it will not build. So what happens is if you actually go over it, it will continue to essentially just paint around, but it won't exceed whatever your percentage opacity is. So if you're at 10% and you start kind of making multiple brush strokes over the same area, it's never going to build beyond 10% until you lift your pen or your mouse pad off and then reapply again and start building, and then you'll get another 10%. With flow, it's cumulative. So if I keep swiping, I'm going to keep increasing by that amount of flow rate. There are some other nuances between flow and opacity, but generally I tend to use 2% flow, 2 to 3% flow for my corrective side of things, and it works well. So just be in around that amount. Now, it depends on how you've created your actual corrective stack. Again, if we create a curve that is very steep, down or up, in which case, it's doing a lot of dodging or burning, then you might have to go down to 1%. If you have something that's very subtle, you may have to go up to 4%. So it really doesn't matter what the number is. It's just kind of start with something and see how it builds. And if you find that it's too much or too little, then go up or down by 1% accordingly. So I'm going to hold down Shift and 0.2, and that's going to give me 2% on my flow rate. And we're going to start actually doing some dodging and burning here. So it doesn't really matter what you start with, whether you start with burn or dodge. It's really all the same. Sometimes I start with burn just to kind of fill in areas that I see that are clearly too light, and then that way I can just kind of correct things back using dodge. So we're going to go ahead and start with some burning here. Now I'm going to start off zoomed out to about this level where I can see my entire subject. It doesn't really matter what zoom level you start at, but I wouldn't start too close, simply because it's just better to address those more noticeable issues. And then zoom level also kind of depends on the type of image you're working on. So if it's a portrait, I never have to really go to 100% because, it's supposed to be a portrait. It's supposed to look pretty natural. So we're not going to overdo it in terms of the dodging and burning. We're going to stick to something that is, simple, doesn't take a whole ton of time. So we're going to be fairly zoomed out the majority of the time, unless there's a very specific reason for us to zoom in. So let's start here and get going. So I'm going to select my burn layer. I've got white selected on my brush as my color, because of course I want to start revealing the mask. If it was black, it would just do nothing. So this little area here I want to just kind of take care of. So let's just put a couple brush strokes into there. We've got a little area here that I want to just even out, help it transition. And you'll notice that, even if the area is not perfect, it will gradually get there. Don't feel like you have to kind of perfectly blend things in yet, because we're going to be dodging around it as well. So I'm just trying to get myself to a point where I know that if I dodge back, it will all kind of flow together. So, this is going to be a back and forth process. We're going to be burning, then dodging, then burning, then dodging. We don't have to just do one and then that's it. We'll eventually kind of come back to dodging and burning in between each other. So let's just go ahead and deal with some of these areas here in the chin. And what I'm basically looking for is just areas that, I feel like don't transition. I mean, what I really want is I want things to be smooth, and I want them to, kind of naturally flow together. What you want to make sure you don't do is remove things that are good. So, for example, we have this here, this darker line. And I may want to soften that, but I don't want to remove it completely because it's actually a contour. We want to have that line there because it defines the feature of our face. For me, it's a bit dark maybe, so it's a toss-up. I could kind of do one of two things here. I could either lighten it or I could burn around it a little bit. So we're on burn right now. Let's see what it looks like if we just kind of burn around it to help it flow. Something like that. So really, I'm just very subtly kind of painting around that to see how it looks. And I don't mind it, but I feel like I do want to dodge it down. So I'm going to just jump to dodge now while it's kind of fresh in my mind. And right where that line was, I'm just going to kind of temper it down a little bit. There we go. So as you can see, like really subtle, but we've just extended the burn area around it a tiny bit and then dodged in the line itself. So really, really subtle stuff. And then over here, I see above the eye, there's some light patches. So let's go ahead and fill those in. Again, I'm resisting the temptation here to do any sort of contouring because we want to just, we want to just focus on corrections. We don't really want to focus on any sort of stylization or enhancement. This is just purely a corrective phase. And the reason you don't want to combine those two is because they're completely different things, right? Here, we would very rarely reduce the opacity of our corrective layers for the simple reason that they're doing correction. And if we reduce the opacity, they're no longer correcting by the appropriate amount. With contouring, on the other hand, we may decide, you know what, we've contoured this image a little bit too much, and we should now lower that opacity, and that's perfectly acceptable. But if you combine the two of them, then obviously you're kind of stuck with what you got. So that's why I always want to keep them on separate layers. All right, so I think these guys here, I'm going to dodge them down, so I'm not going to darken in between. I think that's probably a good start on the burn. Generally, I do a lot less with burn than I do with the dodging. Dodging tends to take more of my time up than burning. So I think that's good there. Let's just see where we're at so far. So as you can see, really subtle changes, but it's all going to add up. It's all going to do something in the end, I promise. So let's go ahead and go into dodge, and now we're going to address some of the issues that are too dark. So we're going to just kind of look for areas where we see, like this, clearly we have to deal with that. There's a spot here. There's some stuff going on here. Here, up in the forehead area, we've got these lines in the neck that we're going to deal with. Little spot here, some stuff here. So, part of it, and kind of I always say this to everybody, when it comes to dodging and burning, part of it is technique and part of it is taste. So really, you can kind of practice until you get your technique down in terms of, just painting, selecting the right brush setting and, things of that nature. But a large part of it is just practicing and training your eye to build up a good taste for what you're doing. And, particularly when it comes to the contouring. On the corrective side, it's a little bit more of a technical process, right? I mean, we visualize and we see the issue and we just keep brushing until the issue goes away. So as long as you're kind of fairly careful with it, it's not really rocket science. It's more just kind of get in there and get it done. With contouring, it's a little bit more of an artistic process, and we'll be covering that in our next lesson. So onwards with our dodge here. Under the eyes, I just want to lighten it a little bit. And these are areas where you want to kind of apply it sparingly. It all depends on the kind of image you're working on. If it's a beauty image, then you probably want to make it as perfect as possible. You don't, for me, my taste is usually to leave things a little bit more natural and not have them 100% perfect, but obviously depending on what the client needs and what they would like. So for a portrait, though, I generally lean towards the natural side of things. We don't want to make somebody look unrealistically perfect, because then it really isn't a portrait anymore, right? It's not a portrait of that person. It's just some sort of make-believe version of them, which I don't think we want. So just kind of going through here and dodging out. So dealing with the eye area, that's kind of all I really want to do. We have some areas in and around above the eyes where I want to actually lighten it a little bit too. So just kind of jumping around wherever I spot an issue, just get in there and fix it. And I'm probably going to zoom in a little bit as well and just kind of address them on a smaller level. But right now I'm just kind of dealing with what I see at this zoom level. All right, so there's a couple of areas here that I can see that, it's like kind of dots that I need to sort out. At this zoom level, I'm having a little bit of trouble actually seeing them properly, so we're going to just leave that, and we're going to come back to it when we zoom in a tiny bit. So a good chunk of this is, other than, like I said, it's a fairly technical, simple process. It's just a matter of identifying things that you shouldn't take away. So sometimes there's contours and things like that you don't really want to remove. Like, for example, this transition here, we want it to be fairly harsh. Like, it's going to define her cheekbone, and obviously the harsher it is, the sharper it looks like that line is. So, we don't want to smooth this out too much. We just kind of want to leave it as is. And similarly here, I don't want to kind of get rid of all of these patches of white, because this is an actual contour around her mouth. So if I take that out completely, it's just going to start to look unnatural. So we do want to retain a little bit of that, and that's kind of part of it when it comes to practicing dodging and burning, is just identifying those areas that we touch and we don't touch. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with this zoom level. I don't think I'm going to do too much more, and of course we can always come back. Like I said, it's an iterative process, so do a little bit and then come back to things. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit now, and we're going to start to work a little bit closer. So for a portrait, this is probably as close as I would work, so we're at 50% here. I may as well just deal with this neck here at this point, because we're looking at it, so let's just take care of it. And so as you can see, I'm not changing any brush settings here, still at 2% flow, just changing my size. I'm using the square bracket keys up or down just to make things fit nicely. Just essentially adjusting it to the size of the lines in the neck. And obviously, we have a little bit of a texture kind of shift that's happening here too. If this was a beauty shot, I may use the healing brush on some of this just to bring down this tighter texture into these lines. But, we're dealing with a portrait here, so I'm just going to kind of quickly remove it using dodge and burn. And, while it may not be 100% perfect, it'll be like 90% perfect, and it will still go unnoticed to pretty much anybody that's looking at the image. So that's always part of it, We're not always striving for perfection. It's always just kind of a trade-off between time spent and end result. So, and that again just comes with experience. What should you do to get kind of the end result you've pictured in your head? So as you can see here, this is really, not rocket science. I'm just dodging it until I find that it's gone and that it flows together with the surrounding areas. All right, and I think while I'm in here, I'm going to just grab the burn layer for a second here, and I'm just going to burn in this little patch to kind of help that flow better. And after I burn it in, I may have to dodge back certain smaller areas, because as you can see, there's little patches coming out now. So, like I said before, you know, it's a back and forth kind of thing. And, you know, again, in a beauty shot, we would be very careful to take every one of these small areas and sort them out. I'm less concerned about that on a portrait, you know. Nobody's going to applaud you and, you know, give you a prize because you made it absolutely perfect on a portrait. It's, you know, just retain the essence of the person and just make it look good, but you don't have to fumble around too much. So now I'm going to dodge down this area over here just to, again, help that kind of flow together. And I'm not going to remove it 100%. Like, I want there to be a little bit of variation there. Again, just kind of keeping things looking natural. There we are. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with the neck. Let's just kind of toggle that on and off, and you can see the difference that makes. And, you know, it doesn't take a ton of time. I'm sort of taking my time through this as we go, just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. But, you know, did you see anything terribly difficult in the process that I was doing there? Probably not, because it's all pretty simple. So it's just a matter of going through and taking the time, painting it, and then move on. So let's go ahead and go back to the face here. So we had these spots that we wanted to deal with, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm just going to kind of smooth out this area. Alright, and then there's probably a few spots here that could also be burned, but let's just get a nice small brush going here and just get into these little gaps. So we have like this line, for example, here. Now, it's kind of a toss-up. You could take that out using a healing brush. You could leave it entirely since it's a portrait, or we can just kind of temper it down a little bit with you know, with some dodging and burning. So it's entirely up to you. I tend to just leave that kind of stuff in for a portrait. You know, if it was a beauty shot, then we'd probably remove it, and I'd personally remove it probably with dodge and burn, because it allows me to leave just a tiny bit of it in. You know, whenever you remove something 100% that is naturally there, it starts to look fake, right? So just by leaving even a little bit in, it still fools the viewer into thinking that this is reality, when, you know, we all know that most of advertising photography is not an accurate representation of reality, thanks in large part to us retouchers, but we're just doing our job, right? All right, so that's, I think, you know, for the purposes of a portrait, that's pretty darn close to where I'd want to be. May just grab my burn here and just fill these areas in a little bit, because they're just still standing out to my eye a bit. And this area around the nose, I think, is kind of bugging me now. All right. So I think we're pretty close as far as this part of the face goes. Let's just toggle on and off, see where we've come. So, you know, we've basically just kind of made that nice and smooth, flows together. And from a portrait standpoint, I think the majority of the bottom part here is looking pretty good. So I'm just going to burn this in a tiny bit. And you know what, now that we're here, I noticed, like, see these little lines here in the eyebrow? We're going to deal with those as well. So let's just burn in any gaps that we feel are too light, and then we're going to dodge them out. All right, again, I think for a portrait, that's pretty good. Our lips are in good shape here, so we don't really need to do much. Yeah, I mean, again, if this was a beauty shot, I may try and get this a little bit more perfect, but for a portrait, I think that's pretty good. And let's just take a look at the forehead, see if there's anything else we need to deal with up here. There's a couple little spots, but, you know, I mean, in the state that it's in, that would be perfectly acceptable for a portrait, and I don't think we really have to dwell on it for too long. All right, so we're pretty happy at this zoom level. Now what we need to do is, I'm not going to go any closer because, again, that would be pointless. Nobody's going to be looking at this image, you know, at like 100% like this. So even though it does look pretty good, we don't need to zoom in. So what we do need to do, though, is zoom back out. And in this case, I'm going to zoom way, way out. And at this zoom level, we actually do see a few little issues that remain. So that's why it's important to zoom out, because it gives you kind of let's call it a bird's eye view of the entire image. And even though we saw the whole thing when we were at, you know, like this zoom level, some of those issues I don't notice. Like right now, it looks pretty good. But when I zoom out to here, there's a few areas that I still want to work on. So for example, there's a couple of patches around here. This kind of doesn't flow. I mean, we've got a little bit of highlight here, and then we've got this shadow area. There's a shadow area here, and then a lighter area, a shadow area. So, you know, on a larger level, we do still see a few problems. And this is kind of why I don't like to call corrective dodge and burn local dodge and burn, because, you know, there's really nothing local about this. These are actually pretty big patches, but they still need to be corrected. So we're not really locally dealing with this thing. I mean, it's like part of our cheek, but they do have to be fixed. So that's why I'm going to stick to my corrective term, whether you like it or not. We can really call it whatever we want, but you kind of get the idea that, you know, it's really just about correction, not so much about, you know, being local or global. That doesn't really tell us much. So let's go ahead and just kind of even out some of this here. And this guy, you know, obviously as you zoom out, it becomes a little bit more difficult to spot some of these things. And that's really just kind of training your eye to identify them. There we are. And sometimes, you know, once you stare at this for long enough, you stop seeing it. So it's good to just take a second, step away from the monitor, and then come back to it, and it'll actually kind of help you to find these things. So again, just kind of looking to make sure everything is flowing together. And then even on the neck here, I've got a couple areas where I feel like I'd want to burn them a tiny bit, just to help it all flow together. There we are. Just filling in these gaps with the burn layer. All right. Now, in terms of the body, the majority of the body's not too bad. There's, you know, maybe a couple little spots on the arms here. If this was a beauty shot, you know, we'd have to make sure that the body's perfect, and really the process is no different than working on the face. We just, you know, spot areas that are too light or too dark and take the corrective action on those areas. You know, with a portrait, this is pretty good, I think. I mean, just no major issues that I spot. Let's just zoom in a tiny bit more. There's like a little line here that we could go through, but I think you get the idea, you know. It's kind of the same thing as when we're working on the neck. And similarly, we have some stuff on the shirt here. If we wanted to kind of iron this shirt digitally, then this is a good way to do it. And I'm going to show you an example that's a little bit more extreme than this, of kind of working with fabrics. But yeah, if we wanted this shirt perfect, we can just kind of keep going back and forth and, you know, dodging and burning through it. So I'm pretty happy with that from a corrective standpoint. Let's just go ahead and toggle this on and off and see where we're at. So as you can see, you know, pretty subtle adjustments, but it's really all you need. I mean, you know, we don't want to make this look doll-like. We want to still keep it looking fairly natural, and I think we've done that pretty well. And we haven't really spent a ton of time on it either, so that's always a plus. All right, so yeah, for me this would be good, and again, depending on how I'm going to crop this, I would probably even crop this bottom part out in the final image, just kind of tighten it a little bit, in which case I don't really care about what's going on with the shirt. If I decided to keep it, then I would indeed spend a bit of time maybe to tidy this up and just make it look nice and clean. So, of course, there is a step of contouring that we want to apply to this to, again, just give it a little bit more pop, a little bit more depth and dimension, but that's going to be something for the next lesson. Now, before we sort of wrap things up, let's take a look at a more extreme example where we have to deal with fabric and how we can actually use dodge and burn to, smooth out even fairly extreme examples of kind of crunchy and folded fabrics.